I observed the humans striking a spherical projectile with their lower extremities while 50,000 of their species screamed for blood. I have classified this as a mass combat exercise. I was told I was incorrect. Roar. The stadium shook. My environmental suit's servos whined in protest against the crushing 1G gravity. Beside me, Callum Voss consumed a roasted meat cylinder wrapped in carbohydrates. He was smiling. Scanner. Processing error. Human emotional display contradicts all known frameworks, unable to classify. Why were they cheering for their own destruction? The specific incident that forced me to file my 147th hazard report this week comes later. You will want to stay for that. 2 hours earlier, the situation had appeared deceptively survivable. My assignment was simple sociology. I, Kelvarus, junior research associate of the Valanthi, was to observe human recreational habits. I arrived at the designated coordinates fully encased in my Class 4 ultraviolet deflection suit. Earth's yellow star emits enough radiation to trigger catastrophic cellular stress in my species within minutes, a terrifying reality the humans casually ignore by wearing porous garments that expose their fragile flesh directly to the cosmic void. Callum Voss greeted me at the transport hub with a display of exposed calcium he called a welcoming smile. He is a sports coach, a title that implies he organizes voluntary combat for physical conditioning. He slapped my shoulder plating with enough kinetic force to rattle my secondary jaw. The gravity here is standard 1G. I managed to wheeze my hollow bones aching under the atmospheric pressure. How do you compensate? Callum Voss did not stop walking. Compensate for what? We entered the arena shortly after. The sheer volume of biological entities packed into the tiered seating was an immediate biological hazard. 50,000 humans were vibrating with kinetic anticipation, their collective body heat creating microclimates of oppressive humidity. My auditory receptors automatically dialed down by 30% to prevent soft tissue rupture. Then, the sound began. It started as a low rhythmic thumping, escalating into a chaotic crescendo of overlapping acoustic waves. From the row behind us, a small, underdeveloped human abruptly emitted a series of sharp, erratic gasps that sounded exactly like the precursor to terminal respiratory failure. Ha! 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 I instantly activated my medical subroutines. The child's distress vocalizations were rhythmic and terrifying. They were clearly suffocating in the dense nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. I prepared to deploy my emergency rebreather, scanning the surrounding adults for signs of panic. Nobody moved to assist the failing juvenile. In fact, Callum Voss looked back at the struggling offspring and mirrored the exact same respiratory spasms. My chromatophores flashed a brilliant, panicked white beneath my UV suit. They were sharing the affliction. Down on the sprawling green battlefield, 22 combatants arranged themselves into opposing factions. A whistle produced an ear-splitting frequency. The massacre began. The humans launched themselves at the central projectile with absolute disregard for skeletal integrity. One combatant slid across the synthetic vegetation, driving his calcified legs into an opponent at lethal velocities. The targeted human flipped violently, impacting the ground with a sickening thud. Ex-scanner kinetic impact detected. Blunt force trauma likely. I began drafting my incident report under correctional violence, yet the fallen human did not summon medical evacuation. He simply stood up. The crowd's distress vocalizations intensified. The child behind me fell off his seating structure, tumbling down 2 metal steps. I braced for the wailing of broken bones. Instead, the child stood up, dusted his knees, and resumed that terrifying respiratory gasping. I turned to Callum Voss, my visual senses wide. Why are they initiating distress vocalizations while observing mutual destruction? Callum swallowed a bite of his food. Distress? Kelvarus, buddy, they're having fun. I accessed the global data nets. Football injuries average 8.1 per 1,000 hours of play. Humans participate in this voluntarily. Fun, I repeated. My translation matrix's concept file immediately corrupted. The atmospheric temperature increased as Earth's lethal yellow star emerged from behind a localized moisture cloud. My suit's internal cooling systems engaged with a frantic, high-pitched whine. The humans around us immediately removed their outer garments, deliberately exposing their dermal layers to the unfiltered cosmic radiation. I watched, paralyzed by biological horror, as their skin began to absorb the carcinogenic light. Callum Voss tilted his head backward, closing his visual receptors. He sighed. He was actively enjoying the cellular damage. On the battlefield below, the violence reached a critical threshold. A combatant wearing red synthetic fibers collided mid-air with a defender in blue. The kinetic transfer was nauseating. Both entities crashed to the turf. My scanner chimed a critical warning. Multiple skeletal micro-fractures detected. Adrenaline levels lethal. One human did not rise. Medical personnel rushed the field, loading the broken warrior onto a transport slab. I prepared to document my first Earth casualty, but as the damaged human was carried away, the entire stadium, including the opposing faction, began clapping their manipulators together. They were applauding the sacrifice. My internal temperature spiked. The suit's warnings flashed red across my visual interface. I began mentally drafting my last will and testament, which brings us back to the mass combat exercise and the deafening roar of 50,000 humans screaming for blood. The spherical projectile arced through the thick air, bypassing the designated guardian, and struck the synthetic webbing at the end of the field. The resulting sonic boom of human vocalizations nearly shattered my audio dampeners. I braced for the losing faction to initiate a riot. I expected fire. I anticipated the structural collapse of the arena. Instead, the child who had tumbled down the stairs earlier grabbed his adult guardian. The child was emitting those exact same erratic respiratory spasms. The scanner vibrated against my palm. Neurochemical scan complete. Dopamine and serotonin overload. My processors stalled. The child wasn't suffocating. The adults weren't experiencing mutual respiratory failure. It was the exact opposite. They were achieving a state of euphoric neurological overload. The violence, the crushing gravity, the radiation exposure, they had weaponized their planet's hostility into entertainment. Callum wiped a layer of toxic condensation from his brow. He looked down at my rigid, trembling environmental suit. His expression shifted from manic aggression to genuine localized concern. He carefully placed his heavy manipulator on my shoulder, deliberately modulating his strength so he didn't crush my collarbone. It was a terrifyingly precise application of restraint. "Hey," Callum said, his voice dropping below the decibel level of an artillery strike. "You holding up okay in that tin can?" I stared at him. He was a predator bred on a nightmare world, yet he was pausing his violent recreation to check my structural integrity. "I am intact," I managed to reply. He grinned. "Good game, right?" I did not reply. We exited the stadium amidst a sea of vibrating, unshielded humans. The child passed us, still producing that bizarre rhythmic vocalization. I now understand it is an enjoyment signal, though my central nervous system remains entirely unconvinced. How a species survives its own recreational habits is a mystery I am not equipped to solve. I have officially recommended banning all Volanthe personnel from observing human sports. I have been here 11 days. I have filed 43 reports. The humans think I am adjusting well. I am not.